In the quiet corners of dimly lit rooms, beneath the cover of shadows that dance along the walls, myths flourish, igniting our imaginations and stretching our beliefs. But what if I told you that the tales of fanged figures lurking in the midnight hour, those ageless vampires we so often associate with gothic novels and horror films, actually have their origins rooted in history's eerie depths? You might be wondering how folklore so simple could blossom into a phenomenon that has captivated generations. By the end of this exploration, you'll unveil not only the historical origins of vampire myths but also the complex societal fears and superstitions that gave rise to these legendary beings. Stay with me, for this journey promises to reveal surprising truths and obscure facts that may forever change how you think about vampires. We'll dive deep into the past, unraveling threads of culture, disease, and fear that entwine to conjure these nocturnal nightmares. Let's embark on this exploration together and dig deep into the tale of the infamous vampire, an entity we often write off as mere fiction or superstition. To understand the origins of vampire myths, we must travel back to an era of unfiltered superstition and dread, a time when science was in its infancy and phenomena like death and disease were wrapped in cloaks of mystery. Picture Europe in the medieval ages. Rampant plagues, high mortality rates, and unexplained illnesses filled the air with terror. It's here, in the heart of this chaos, that many vampire legends began to take root. You may find it shocking that during the plague, many people believed that the dead rose from their graves to drink the blood of the living, perpetuating a cycle of life and death that terrified communities already reeling from loss. Could it be that these gruesome beliefs emerged from a fundamental misunderstanding of the natural decay of a body? As victims of diseases like the bubonic plague would often suffer from symptoms that might appear to some as signs of vampirism, like severe bruising or decay leading to spontaneous bleeding, these early observers began seeing the dead not as absent but as haunting, malevolent spirits. Now, here's something you might not expect. Evidence of vampire-like creatures doesn't just dwell in European folklore. In ancient civilizations across the globe, tales of blood-sucking entities have emerged from the shadows of time. From the Mesopotamian Lilitu, a female demon known for seducing men to sap their life force, to the chupacabra of Latin America, these feared beings echo the vampire narrative, suggesting that the obsession with blood and the undead may be a universal human concern. Isn't that a striking revelation? While we represent vampires through various cultural lenses, the underlying fear appears universal. This psychological linkage ignites a hidden intrigue that compels us to confront ideas about life, death, and what lies beyond. Consider this: particularly chilling aspects of vampire lore were often influenced by the neighboring societal beliefs and fears. In Slavic countries, for instance, superstition reigned supreme. With the unexplainable rise in unexplained deaths, such as those resulting from tuberculosis or extreme night terrors, many turned to folklore, creating elaborate tales about the strigoi and urbane, entities that would supposedly rise from the grave to prey on their loved ones. These narratives led to the ritualistic exhumation of corpses, where severed heads and wooden stakes became vital in combating the rising undead. The sheer fascination and fear of these myths not only give us insight into their origins but also reveal a dark curiosity at play. What drove those communities to such measures? Could fear of death lead them to confront the gruesome realities of their own mortality? These questions only hint at the complexity of folklore surrounding vampires, whose roots are tangled deeply in the very heart of humanity itself. As we continue our exploration, an exciting twist awaits. The word vampire itself has an ambiguous etymology, slipping through various languages and cultures like shades of twilight. The term, believed to have originated from the French vampire in the early 18th century, has gripped Western society's imagination. But its journey through languages also exposes us to varying degrees of interpretation, where some sources speak of the undead as blood drinkers, others see them as beings tied more closely to the essence of life than mere ruin. What's more, the iconography of the vampire has also evolved remarkably. The 19th century Romantic movement played a key role in reimagining these creatures, with literature and art depicting them as tragic figures rather than simple monsters. Take, for instance, John Polidori's The Vampire, which not only reshaped public perception but also laid the groundwork for future interpretations in both literature and cinema. This nuanced transformation raises an intriguing question: why did society suddenly glamorize a being previously feared? Could the romantic allure of vampires reflect an underlying desire to confront our fears of death and the unknown? It is a fascinating duality of existence, a specter of death given a visage of allure, forever captivating the imagination. Adding another layer, as the Industrial Revolution dawned, societal changes began to permeate the fabric of vampire lore. With urbanization came the separation of people from the pastoral life, where familiar comforts were replaced by ominous shadows of factories and crowded cities. During this upheaval, folk tales morphed once again, shifting from something understood within the context of agrarian life to a symbol of modern fears, alienation, industrialization, and the unknown consequences of progress. With these shifts, the figure of the vampire transformed from a mere creature of the night into a reflection of society's deep-seated anxieties. The vampire represented not just terror, but also seduction and a deep longing for connection, a longing that speaks to the very heart of human existence. This evolution and adaptation of myths can be seen in the proliferation of vampire stories throughout the 20th century, especially in literature and film. You might be wondering how the emergence of such characters in popular culture contributes to their mystique. Standout moments in the canon, such as Bram Stoker's Dracula, offer a wealth of exploration into the interplay between sexuality, power dynamics, and cultural fears of that era. Consider the significance of Dracula. This novel not only epitomized the Victorian anxieties surrounding sexuality but also critiqued fears about the changing social order of the time. The figure of Dracula emerged as a symbol of both allure and terror, embodying the conflicting desires society wrestled with during an explosive period of change. Yet, this new wave of vampire mythos invited individuals to explore previously forbidden topics: desire, immoral life, and the tension between civilization and savagery. It's intriguing to contemplate that these ancient fears, now dressed in contemporary clothing, echo the human struggle to understand existence. As we reflect on the transformative nature of vampire myths, we also need to examine the role that historical events have played in shaping public perception. For instance, in the early 20th century, the Spanish flu pandemic left a trail of devastation across the globe. Amidst this trauma, literature surged with depictions of vampires, resonating with those who endured the plague-like deaths that bled into daily life. This cultural response aligns with the notion that literature serves as a canvas for the collective subconscious to confront trauma, fear, and ultimately, hope. But even more striking is how contemporary pandemics have further influenced vampire mythology in recent years. As seen with series like Twilight or The Vampire Diaries, the creatures of the night have taken on more nuanced relationships reflective of modern fears and desires. These narratives serve as mirrors reflecting our anxieties and transformations as we confront our realities in an ever-changing world. And here's where we reach an important question: is it possible that vampire legends are more than just stories of the supernatural? Could they be windows into humanity's very essence and collective psyche, a way of confronting our fears surrounding death, the unknown, and the trials of the human condition? This psychological depth weaves an intricate tapestry that stitches together the fabric of human history, folklore, and fear into a singular narrative, one that continues to evolve. But there's so much more to unearth. As we become captivated by the ancient fears and modern adaptations of vampire myths, recognize that these tales have not only persisted but thrived in our cultural consciousness for generations. In the next part of our journey, we will delve deeper into the socio-political realities that continue to shape vampire lore, exploring the intersection of myths with modern societal issues and how these age-old narratives still resonate profoundly in our lives today. Stay with me as we unearth further secrets and unravel the dark, enchanting legacy of vampires that enriches the tapestry of our shared human experience. The haunting mysteries still beckon from their shadowed corners, and who knows what revelations await as we continue this path together. As we peel back the layers of vampire mythology, a remarkable pattern begins to emerge that links these legends to socio-political contexts throughout history. The vampire is not just a monster of the night, but a vessel carrying the weight of societal concerns and fears. This is particularly evident as we traverse through epochs of turmoil, reflecting how the dark allure of the vampire serves both as a mirror and as a commentary on humanity's trials and tribulations. Take, for example, the tumultuous social climate of the early 20th century. The rise of early industrialization marked the beginning of a profound transformation in European and American societies. Rapid urbanization led to increased alienation, particularly among the working class. This disconnection from nature and community fueled a growing anxiety, one that the vampire epitomized. Seen as a being that preyed upon the vulnerable, the vampire became a representation of societal fears regarding exploitation and the dehumanizing effects of industry. In horror fiction, particularly in the Gothic and Victorian literature of the period, this fear of exploitation manifested through narrative themes surrounding the vampire as both predator and seducer. Consider the stark dichotomy within Dracula. Count Dracula embodies both the seduction of modernity and the fear of its consequences. As an outsider, he represents the danger of unchecked desires and the potential loss of societal structure. The very act of vampirism becomes a metaphor for economic imperialism, consuming and draining the vitality of those who fall under its power. As terrified citizens of newly industrialized cities grappled with economic uncertainty, the vampire became a moralistic figure, warning against the dangers of temptation and the consequences of moral decay. But the transformation of vampire myths didn't end with Victorian anxieties. They continued to evolve alongside major historical events. For instance, in the wake of World War I, the concept of the vampire began to reflect not only personal fears but broader existential crises. Literary works from this era grapple with the futility and horror of war, inadvertently weaving in vampiric themes of resurrection and eternal life against a backdrop of devastation. The depiction of characters like the vampire in this context indicates a haunting persistence of survival and rebirth. Amidst the chaos, stories shifted from monstrous figures haunting the shadows to more complex portrayals. Here, the boundary blurred between hunter and hunted, drawing parallels to returning soldiers grappling with the psychological burdens of warfare. In this sense, the vampire became representative of not just a fear of death, but also an exploration of trauma and the human condition within social discourse. Fast forward to the mid-20th century and one can see how societal upheavals, including the civil rights movement and the rise of feminism, further reframed our understanding of the vampire. As marginalized groups fought for visibility and equality, vampires transitioned once more, aligning closely with the themes of empowerment and subversion. They became embodiments of resistance against oppression, offering an intriguing contrast to their historical portrayal merely as threats. Take the work of Anne Rice in the 1970s and 1980s. Her interview with the vampire series elevated vampires not simply to monstrous status, but instead to tragic figures, capable of yearning, love, and vulnerability. By humanizing members of the undead, Rice diverged from traditional notions of evil and fear, inviting readers to explore themes of identity, sexuality, and existentialism. In a time when social change was rampant and questions of personal autonomy and desire were surfacing, her works resonated deeply, merging personal and cultural conflicts. Has the vampire, then, become a metaphor for the human struggle for agency? In this reading, every fanged protagonist embodies the qualities of those who have felt marginalized, reflecting the fears and aspirations of various movements. As feminism began reshaping the narratives around gender, vampires shifted from symbols of repression to icons of sexual freedom, identity exploration, and transcendence. As we continued into the 21st century, the evolution took another turn in the wake of globalization and the digital age. The vampire transcended borders, culture, and genre. Series like True Blood and The Vampire Diaries indulged viewers with fantastical allure, capitalizing on themes of love, acceptance, and the clash of moralities in a multicultural world. Through these narratives, the vampire emerged not just as a creature of instinct but as a figure deeply enmeshed in the discourse over social issues including race, sexuality, and community. Moreover, with the growth of social media and the impact of the internet, the shared experience of vampire lore reinforced its relevance in contemporary society. Readers and viewers have become part of a colossal cultural conversation, co-creating these myths and allowing for varying interpretations across demographics. This adaptability has reinforced the notion that vampires, once the solitary creatures of horror, now represent collective desires and fears. So, why do vampires persist, enthralling audiences through the ages? At the heart of these tales lies a raw exploration of humanity itself, a confrontation with the unknown and a reflection of our innermost fears. From the medieval ages to the modern era, vampire myths have served as allegories elucidating the complexities within us, allowing exploration into mortality, identity, and the human experience. Our attraction to vampires, then, extends beyond mere curiosity. They encompass life's paradoxes and uncertainties. They grant us the ability to venture into taboo territories, examining the interplay of desire, intimacy, and fear without the constraints of everyday life. We are drawn to these narratives, for within them lies comfort, the allure of immortality coupled with the universal truths of love and loss, hope and despair. As we come to the end of this exploration, it becomes clear that the vampire is not merely a figure to frighten us. It is a rich tapestry woven from the threads of human experience, history, and emotion. Throughout the ages, vampires have morphed, adapted, and thrived within popular culture, each incarnation mirroring the fears and desires of the time. The tales we tell about these beings encapsulate the ongoing human struggle with mortality and the quest for understanding, giving rise to a multitude of questions about our very existence. So, as you reflect on these narratives, remember their depth and the layers of meaning hidden within their myths. Ultimately, the enduring legacy of the vampire teaches us about ourselves. In crafting these legends, we confront the darkness within and around us, shining a spotlight on our deepest fears while celebrating our capacity for love, transformation, and resilience. Thus, will vampires continue to haunt our collective consciousness? The answer is undoubtedly yes. They remind us that while the face of terror may change, the essence of what we fear and what we seek remains eternally entwined with those familiar famed figures lurking in the shadows. So, the next time you delve into the world of vampires, I hope you embrace the deeper truths they reveal, the shadows that connect us all, and the haunting beauty of what it means to be truly alive.